Have you heard that a tribunal in Niger has ordered the release of Niger's former president's son from house arrest? After the coup, Mohammad Bazoum and his family were house arrested. France and the West tried their best to reinstate Mohammad Bazoum, but nothing worked. The military junta feared that if Mohammad Bazoum or his son were released, the West would back them up and use influence to make either of them the new president. But now, the same thing has happened. Not a civilian tribunal but a military tribunal issued a verdict, ordering Niger's junta to release Mohammad Bazoum's son. This has made things quite controversial, given that a conflict within the military is rare. Does it mean that a faction in Niger's junta wants to make Mohammad Bazoum's son the new president? Let's find out. Mr. Bazoum, along with his wife and son, had been confined to the presidential house since the coup on July 26. Later, on October 19th, he tried to escape with his family, cooks, and security via helicopter, but they were halted. Niger's junta revealed that it had thwarted an attempt by the ousted President Mohammad Bazoum to escape. The interim authorities disclosed that Bazoum, along with his family and accomplices within the security forces, had plotted to drive a vehicle to the outskirts of the capital, Niamey, and catch a helicopter to neighboring Nigeria. Bazoum's party and family members asserted that he had no access to running water, electricity, or fresh goods, drawing condemnation from former Western allies. On the same day, the initial group of French soldiers, ordered out of Niger by its post-coup military rulers, arrived in N'Djamena, the capital of neighboring Chad, traveling by road without significant issues. Therefore, it was speculated that France could have been behind Bazoum's escape plan. Despite support from France and other countries and organizations for Bazoum's release, the military regime remained inflexible at present. Family members mentioned the last time they heard from him was the day before the escape plan. It was expected that since Bazoum had tried escaping, he could face serious charges and be severely punished. Later, there were calls for the release of the president from both local and international sources. Since the coup, the former president's relatives have spoken out about the abusive treatment they endured under the new military regime. The family lawyer, Ould Salem, expressed concern about the military authorities' fixation on President Bazoum's family. Later, the West African bloc, ECOWAS, called on the coup leaders to reinstate Mr. Bazoum to the presidency. ECOWAS had threatened military intervention if diplomatic efforts failed and imposed substantial economic sanctions. But nothing could scare the Niger's military junta, which was determined to prosecute Bazoum. It was later reported that Bazoum had appealed to the West Africa Bloc Court to free him. Bazoum's lawyer asked the ECOWAS court to order Niger's military rulers to end his arbitrary arrest and hand power over to him. ECOWAS, which imposed sanctions against Niger, warned that it could intervene militarily in Niger if diplomatic efforts to return Bazoum to power failed as a last resort. If the court rules in favor of Bazoum Diagne mentioned, Niger has the legal obligation to execute the decision. However, the leaders of Niger's coup have announced their intention to prosecute the democratically elected Bazoum on charges of high treason and undermining internal and external security. What's more, the European Union reiterated its support for ECOWAS's position and its call for the immediate and unconditional release of Bazoum and his family. The EU position was said to be clear and unchanged. The EU does not recognize authorities arising from the putsch. President Bazoum remains the sole legitimate president of Niger. It was being seen that not only France but the EU was trying to interfere in Niger's politics, and the release of Bazoum was directly beneficial to it. Later, the ECOWAS court issued a directive for the immediate release of Mohammad Bazoum, the deposed president of Niger. The court, headquartered in Abuja, Nigeria, emphasized the need for his immediate and unconditional release, and instructed his reinstatement, highlighting his role as the representative of Niger and his continued position as the president of the republic. The ruling cited infringements on constitutional rights. However, despite ECOWAS proposing to lift sanctions in exchange for Bazoum's release, General Abdourahmane Chiani, the military leader of Niger, refused to comply, insisting on Bazoum's continued detention. During a summit, ECOWAS leaders reiterated their call for Bazoum's release and advocated for a shorter transition period to civilian rule, currently set at 3 years by the junta. While the military leader agreed to reduce the transition period, he did not specify the duration. In response, ECOWAS announced that it would uphold sanctions on Niger, but suggested forming a committee to collaborate with the junta in establishing a transition roadmap. Depending on the outcomes of these discussions, sanctions would be gradually eased. It can be seen that the ECOWAS was trying to get Bazoum released in return for lifting sanctions, but this tactic did not work. Niger's military declared its intention to charge ousted President Mohammad Bazoum with high treason, just hours after a Nigerian delegation hinted at the willingness of the country's coup leaders to engage in diplomatic efforts to resolve the crisis. In a statement aired on national television late on Sunday, a spokesperson for Niger's military detailed the charges against Bazoum, accusing him of high treason and undermining the internal and external security of the country. Bazoum, at the age of 63, along with his family, has been confined to the president's official residence in Niamey since the coup on July 26, prompting international concerns about their well-being in detention. ECOWAS consistently called for Bazoum's reinstatement, imposing significant economic sanctions on Niger and threatening military intervention if civilian rule is not restored. But what Niger's military junta wanted to do with Bazoum? ECOWAS has approved the deployment of a standby force to restore constitutional order in Niger, signaling its dedication to seeking a diplomatic resolution to the crisis. The spokesperson for Niger's military, Colonel Major Amadou Abdrahmani, downplayed concerns about Bazoum's health, asserting that the deposed leader had a doctor's visit the previous day and no health issues were reported. Abdrahmani criticized ECOWAS sanctions on Niger, labeling them as illegal, inhumane, and humiliating, citing challenges for people to access medicines, food, and electricity. This military statement followed a meeting between a group of Nigerian Islamic scholars and Niger's coup leader, Abdourahmane Chiani, where the general agreed to engage in direct talks with ECOWAS. Sheikh Abdullahi Balalau, leading the Nigerian delegation, stated that their mission aimed to establish a dialogue between the junta coup leaders in Niger and ECOWAS. Chiani agreed to direct discussions with ECOWAS leaders during the meeting. The visit received approval from Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, who heads ECOWAS and firmly opposes the coup. Charges against Bazoum are likely to heighten tensions between the military in Niger and the international community. The military's announcement of charges suggests a reluctance to release Bazoum, potentially strengthening their position in future negotiations. The possibility of military intervention to reinstate Bazoum has caused division among ECOWAS members and triggered warnings from foreign powers, including Russia and Algeria. Niger's neighboring countries, Mali and Burkina Faso, governed by military regimes from coups, view intervention as a declaration of war. Chiani's delegation expressed gratitude to Guinea for its support, indicating the coup leader's efforts to solidify alliances amid regional and global pressures. The coup in Niger represents a significant setback for Western nations, considering Niamey a partner in the Sahel region to counter insurgency linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The US and France, along with other European countries, have invested heavily in military assistance and training for Niger's forces, with over 2,500 military personnel stationed in the region. But what has the military tribunal ordered just recently? Well, the West had been doing propaganda earlier that if there were charges on Bazoum, why was his family also detained? This argument was being used against the Niger's military junta, which proved to be valid. Inflicting a collective punishment was impacting the junta's reputation, making it look like a dictator. Therefore, just recently, Salim Bazoum, the 22-year-old son of ousted Niger President Mohammad Bazoum, and Bazoum's wife were granted provisional release on Monday, as announced by the Niamey Military Tribunal. A source close to the deposed president mentioned to AFP news agency that Salim Bazoum left Niamey for Lome, Togo's capital, arriving on Monday evening. The Togolese government confirmed a deal for Salim's release after mediation from Togo and Sierra Leone, but did not disclose his whereabouts. On Monday, Togo's Foreign Minister Robert Doucet met with Niger's military-appointed Prime Minister in Niamey, according to Nigerian public television. This meeting followed Doucet's mid-December trip, where he claimed to have reached an agreement with the Prime Minister on the transition's content and timing. But does that mean that the coup leaders release Bazoum's son and wife on their will? Well, the answer is yes. Because it was a military tribunal, it's unlikely that the tribunal ordered the opposite of what Niger's junta wanted. Niger's ousted President Mohammad Bazoum's son, Salem Bazoum, has been released by a military tribunal after spending over 5 months in detention. Salem headed to Togo following mediation efforts by regional leaders that secured his freedom. The military tribunal declared Salem Bazoum's release as provisional, emphasizing that he would need to respond to justice when called upon. He faced charges related to conspiring to undermine the state's authority in connection with the coup. Togo's foreign minister, Robert Doucet, arrived in Niger to escort Salem Bazoum out of the country, as stated in the tribunal's announcement. Sierra Leone also played a role in mediation efforts to secure the release of the ousted president's son, according to an official statement. But is this release unconditional? Well, it was a provisional bail, not a permanent release, which means Bazoum's family is liable to be arrested if something goes wrong. Provisional release, also known as pretrial release or bail, means the temporary liberation of an individual who has been arrested but has not yet been convicted of a crime. This allows the person to resume their normal life while awaiting trial, subject to specific conditions and assurances. The decision to grant provisional release is based on several reasons, with a primary focus on upholding the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. Detention during the pretrial phase can have negative consequences, even if the individual is eventually acquitted. A judicial authority, usually a judge, determines the granting of provisional release by considering factors such as the nature of the offense, the strength of the prosecution's case, the risk of flight or reoffending, public safety, and guarantees for trial appearance. If granted, the individual must adhere to specific conditions set by the court, including regular reporting to authorities, surrendering travel documents, refraining from certain activities or locations, and meeting with a probation officer for supervision and support. Violation of these conditions can lead to rearrest and potential additional charges. Therefore, if Salem Bazoum does something suspicious, or the case against him and his family reaches court, he has to submit himself. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. In the past month, the ECOWAS Court of Justice ruled the family's detention as arbitrary and ordered the reinstatement of Bazoum. The court, whose decisions are final, provided the junta with 1 month to outline how it plans to implement the order. Therefore, this decision comes in response to the earlier verdict. The Niger junta did not want to follow the ECOWAS court order, but neither did it want to tarnish its reputation for breaking laws. Hence, a military tribunal was arranged, and instead of Bazoum and his family, only his family was released. But what will be Bazoum's fate? As per reports, Niger's military is arguing that they have released the family of the ousted president, Mohammad Bazoum, but they have decided to keep Bazoum in custody due to high treason charges against him. The military junta asserts that Bazoum is facing serious allegations of high treason, and they have plans to prosecute him for these charges. Therefore, it's less likely that Bazoum might be released any sooner. High treason is a severe offense commonly associated with betraying one's country, and in many legal systems, it carries harsh penalties. In this context, the military is claiming that Bazoum's actions or alleged involvement in the events leading to his removal amount to high treason. This charge could suggest accusations of attempting to undermine the government, incite rebellion, or collaborate with external forces against the state. And since the charges are serious, there are fewer chances of any provisional release or bail. However, by releasing Bazoum's family, the military might be signaling that their actions are specifically aimed at Bazoum himself and not the entire family. This move could also be interpreted as an effort to address international concerns about the well-being of Bazoum's family, highlighting that their actions primarily target Bazoum based on legal considerations. What's more, the Nigerian junta has temporarily released the deposed president's family under specific conditions. This means the release is not permanent and contingent on certain terms. A critical condition specifies that if the released family members engage in activities against the junta, especially with support from Western allies, they may face rearrest. The provisional release is a subtle arrangement, indicating that any actions perceived as conflicting with the junta's interests could lead to the family members being detained once again. This approach by the junta establishes a potential point of leverage. While allowing the family's release, the junta imposes conditions that restrict their actions, particularly in collaboration with Western allies, effectively creating a form of collateral. The implicit message is that the well-being of the released family members is connected to the behavior of the deposed president's allies and Western supporters. Any attempts to oppose or work against the junta might result in the family members being rearrested, impacting the released president, who essentially becomes a form of collateral. Therefore, the Nigerian military junta is hesitant to release the ousted President Bazoum due to strategic concerns. The junta is worried that Bazoum's release could attract support from Western nations, especially France, potentially allowing him to make a political comeback. The junta is cautious about the prospect that, upon regaining freedom, Bazoum might align himself with Western interests, particularly those of France. There's a concern that with backing from Western nations, Bazoum may actively seek a return to political power in Niger. Furthermore, there's a specific worry that, if reinstated, Bazoum might make statements advocating for the involvement of French and possibly even US troops in Niger. This situation raises the possibility of Bazoum being seen as a leader heavily influenced or controlled by Western powers, effectively acting as a puppet advancing Western interests. By keeping Bazoum in custody, the junta aims to prevent the potential scenario of him gaining external support that could be used to orchestrate a political comeback. Additionally, the junta seeks to avoid a situation where Bazoum, once released, could call for foreign military intervention in Niger, particularly by Western powers. The junta's decision to detain Bazoum is driven by the desire to maintain control over the political landscape and prevent him from being perceived as a figure backed by the West who could influence Niger's internal affairs. The release of the ousted president's family by the Nigerian military junta is perceived as a strategic maneuver aimed at relieving pressure and redirecting attention from the junta's actions, particularly the detention of President Bazoum. Presenting the release of family members as a humanitarian gesture is designed to portray the junta as responsive to concerns about the well-being of Bazoum's family. This narrative could create a perception that the junta is open to concessions, potentially easing international criticism. The junta may aim to mitigate international pressure by demonstrating a willingness to release specific individuals, creating a more favorable perception, especially among Western nations and international organizations, advocating for Bazoum's release. Releasing the family could divert advocacy efforts and campaigns that were primarily focused on securing President Bazoum's freedom. This strategic shift in attention may temporarily diffuse the momentum behind calls for Bazoum's release. The act of releasing family members can function as a distraction from broader political issues and questions about the legitimacy of the junta's rule. It allows the junta to control the narrative, presenting a seemingly conciliatory gesture while retaining control over the detained president. Notably, the release of the family may come with conditions or limitations on their activities, subtly conveying that actions against the junta's interests could result in the re-arrest of family members, creating leverage for the junta. Now, there are minimal chances of the Niger junta releasing the ousted President Bazoum. Despite condemnation from France, a former ally of President Bazoum, the junta appears unaffected, suggesting that external diplomatic pressure, even from significant Western nations, may not be sufficient to sway the junta's decision regarding Bazoum's release. Additionally, the threat from the economic community of West African states to intervene militarily in Niger has not deterred the junta, indicating a determination to hold on to Bazoum even if it means defying the collective will of neighboring states. What's more, the junta's reluctance to release Bazoum might be linked to its assertion that it possesses evidence of treason against the ousted president. By keeping Bazoum in custody, the junta may be intending to present a case before a court, suggesting a belief in a strong legal basis for his continued detention. Furthermore, the junta's statement about presenting evidence against Bazoum and the absence of an immediate release may indicate a preference for handling the matter through legal channels, possibly involving a court trial, to address the allegations against Bazoum. Holding Bazoum in custody provides the junta with a level of political control, allowing them to manage the narrative and potential political repercussions. This strategy helps maintain a grip on the situation, even in the face of international pressure. However, even if Bazoum's fate remains uncertain, his son and wife have been temporarily released. As long as they don't engage with France and make a plot against Niger's junta, they will remain free, and Bazoum will stay safe. However, if otherwise happen, things can get worse. What do you think? Why Niger's military junta accepted to release Mohammad Bazoum's son and wife? Do you believe it's a good gesture not to extend the treason charges to Bazoum's wife and son and release them? In the comment section right below, let us know your thoughts on what the West will do by using Bazoum's wife and son as an excuse to interfere in Niger. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.